what I've seen in this short amount of time, and the negative things that I've seen, this de-emphasis on the family, this de-emphasis on religion and Christianity, this de-emphasis on pride in your country, this blame America first mentality, this apathy to defend this nation, almost the idea that this nation's not worth defending, is tremendously disheartening. And I look at this presidential race, and I see the choices that we have now, and I see some very large disparities in not only how the country is going to be looked at by our next commander-in-chief, but how will they address our enemies, how will they address the problems. But we've been talking with Rick Santorum about his book, It Takes a Family, and it has been it's a wonderful book. I think just a very unique and influential today, as important today as it was on its publication day. It's a few years old, but I just think its relevancy, if not, we're appreciative of his time. It's very important, and we really appreciate having people that are really conservative pioneers, people that really stand up for conservative values, that will tell you the truth about these important issues, such as Rick Santorum. And this very interesting, unique, I think, think tank centered out of Washington, D.C., and Lord knows we need as many of those conservative, Christian-based, religious-based think tanks in Washington, D.C. as we can possibly get. And you can find his The Gathering Storm write-ups that he does right there at the Ethics and Policy Center. He had, of course, the one we talked about with Iran, but even more recently posted today, and I thought was very interesting, was his write-up on Hugo Chavez and the purchasing of 24 Russian fighter jets that Hugo Chavez purchased, and sort of the swaggering, threatening-like manner in which Hugo Chavez says that he will address the U.S. or Western allies with his new military force. Of course, these fighters have missile capabilities that they can use. And so it is very interesting that these things are taking place. And what kind of leadership are we going to have to deal with these kind of rogues like Hugo Chavez? Of course, we had the naive, short-sighted, blame America first people like Jody Evans and Code Pink that I did debate with several weeks ago that just thought that people like Hugo Chavez are just the cat's meow, just top drawer people. And it just shows you the short-sightedness. And, of course, in today's article, the August 5th article entitled Enemy Roundup by Rick Santorum, you can read his analysis and thoughts on the Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez and his purchasing of 24 fighter jets, and giving a warning to the U.S. that any gringo ship, this is a quote, any gringo ship that sails into brown waters, river waters, will itself turn brown and go to the bottom because they'll not get through. Of course, these are the kind of threats we see all the time from Hugo Chavez, constantly threatening the U.S., constantly using whatever resources and things available to him to try to undermine the United States. Hold on there. I just got you live on the air, caller. Go ahead and tell me your question.
I don't have a question. I'm just wondering why you're cherry picking from the book of Rick Santorum, who couldn't even win re-election in his own state as an incumbent. I mean, that guy is just a gigantic hate monger and so fearful of this non-existent homosexual agenda and stuff. I mean, I don't know why you would want to put your voice next to the voice of his as a self-proclaimed conscious of Kansas.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll tell you why. One, I agree with him. Obviously, I wouldn't put my endorsement behind him. I believe in conservative values. That's what his book talks about. And as far as, I don't know, are you saying you don't see an enemy in radical Islam? Is that one of your so-called enemy things?
I mean, I think that anytime you try to look for an enemy in any religious group as a whole, it becomes a very dangerous thing. I think that there are radical elements of every religion that we should all be afraid of, and I don't think that Islam is the biggest offender in my book. I think. I don't know.
Are you one of these 9/11 truther guys that think Bush and Cheney blew up the towers, or?
No, not at all. And I think that's as equally a ridiculous outlook as the people that just want to blame all Muslims for it. Like, no, of course not. Like,
well, you never know. We're going to have them on the 19th if you want to listen to their story. But if you believe that we actually were attacked, not by our own country, on 9/11, and you cherish those 3,000 Americans that were killed, then you have to look at how do we stop those things from happening again. And you only have to go back to the 90s to see that this country was a giant piñata to terrorist attacks, to our interests in the U.S. and around the world. I mean, I don't understand where we're fabricating enemies. These enemies kind of were making American blood run in the street.
Yeah, I guess this is the trouble if you get into when you go into a show like this. I guess we're going to have to agree.
Well, I mean, I'm willing to hear your side. Obviously, I'm giving you the mic time. These minutes are precious. But I mean, like I said, I just started at the very beginning. Either you believe 9/11 was a farce and we had no enemy, and because that's the way I go when you say we're creating an enemy that's really not there. We're cherry picking an enemy. We're really good at post-event investigation. It wasn't very long until we knew where the people that did the conspiracy on 9/11, where they were from. And every one of them was Islamic. And so, I mean...
Yeah, every one of them was from Saudi Arabia. And how many missions have we run in that country to root out terrorism there? About 0. Right.
But, we have to deal with the enemies that are in front of us. So Osama bin Laden was, the force. These people were, do you not equate that to there? Maybe because that's where we start. This is a global battle against terrorism. It's not one country and then you're done kind of deal. We're not lobbing bombs into pill factories and going home. We're in a long extended battle. And just like we were against the Soviets. If you believe that the Soviets were real and that we had a problem there, I don't understand. The disconnect.
I can't believe that you're that you're going after the Cold War, which was again the Soviet. Our idea of what the Soviets were capable of, or at least what we were made to think the Soviets were capable of, and what the Soviets were actually capable of, was night and day. Once that regime and that country fell apart as the USSR, once we were able to get in there and check some stuff out, it was pretty obvious those guys couldn't even build light bulbs.
Oh my gosh!
They threw so much money into building up and massing tanks and stuff.
So they were not
old technology. Had it come to an all-out war, which thank goodness it's not, but they wouldn't have stood a chance. But don't go back.
That's amazing. It's amazing how folks will look at these threats that we have and say, the Soviets really weren't that dangerous. Those nuclear weapons, weren't really a problem. And, to look at all the attacks that we had in, the U.S. prior to 9/11 and say, well, we don't really have a threat from radical Islamic extremists when they get on the tube every day and tell you they'll wipe us out. They're going to wipe us out. They're going to wipe out Israel. They're going to wipe us out. I think you've got your head in the sand. I think you've got...
just allow me to connect the dots for you for a second.
Oh, please do.
Were the Soviets, good intention towards the United States? No, absolutely not. But when we had the opportunity to fight them in a just way, which was, kind of black ops helping the Afghanis defeat the Soviets in their own place, that was right there the seed we planted for events that were to come 20 years later. Had we stayed there and supported the rebuilding of that region instead of just going, here are your Stinger missiles, all right, see you later, we wouldn't be in the pot we're in right now. I think that is just typical, Reagan tactics. Let's throw a bunch of money at it, and then hopefully it'll go away, and I can go back to having people tell me what to say.
Oh, my goodness. Well, I'll tell you what. I don't disagree with you 100% on whether we could have stayed and given some help. But giving money to fight the Soviets in Afghanistan was very helpful to our fight against the Soviets because it depleted their forces down. I'm just not one of those blame America first people. And I'm not one of those people that says, well, we're the cause of all of our problems and blah, 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 blah. And I am a Reagan supporter. I'm a Reagan Republican. I grew up during that time. I saw the difference between the capitulation of Jimmy Carter and the moral relativism of Bill Clinton. But listen, call us back later. We've got a new guest coming on, and we're going to do the NRA, and maybe you can think about how bad guns are for a while. But we'll call us back and debate anytime. Appreciate your time, caller.